"She is not broken, she is forged in fire." The words thundered through the great hall like a crack of lightning. Every head turned as Alpha King Malachi rose from his throne, his massive frame wrapped in white furs and crowned with ancient gold. His golden eyes blazed with fury that made even the bravest wolves lower their gaze. Neve remained frozen on her knees, still reeling from Riker's rejection. "The Moonstone Pack deserves a perfect Luna, not damaged goods," he had sneered, his words echoing off marble columns. The assembly had murmured agreement, their judgment crushing her like stones. But Malachi descended the dais with predatory grace, each footfall silencing the whispers. The most powerful werewolf alive moved through the crowd as they parted like water. When he reached her, the world narrowed to just his presence, his scent of pine and steel, his hand extended toward her trembling form. "I claim her as my chosen mate." Gasps rippled through hundreds of onlookers. The Alpha King claiming a rejected, scarred she-wolf. Impossible. Scandalous. Malachi's voice softened as he looked down at her, and something in his scarred face held only recognition, not pity. "You are not broken. You are exactly what I need." He leaned closer, his promise meant only for her. "And I will prove it to you every day until you believe it." The Grand Assembly convened only once every decade, when the full moon hung heaviest in the winter sky, and all pack leaders gathered under one roof. The Blood Crown Empire's great hall stretched impossibly vast, its vaulted ceilings disappearing into shadows, while golden chandeliers cast flickering light across hundreds of wolves, dressed in their finest regalia. Neve had never seen anything so magnificent or so terrifying. She walked 3 steps behind Riker as tradition demanded, her simple gray dress a stark contrast to his ceremonial leathers. The Moonstone Pack was small, barely 50 wolves strong, but Riker carried himself with the pride of an emperor. His dark hair was pulled back severely, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. Once, Neve had thought him handsome. Now she saw only the coldness in his green eyes. "Remember," he said without turning, his voice low enough that only she could hear, "you speak only if addressed directly. Don't embarrass me." The words stung, but Neve was used to stings. She had built a fortress around her heart from them. The mate bond thrummed faintly between them, a golden thread she had felt snap into place 6 months ago when their eyes met across the Moonstone clearing. Fated mates. The rarest, most sacred gift the moon goddess could bestow. Neve had wept with joy that night, believing her years of loneliness had finally ended. She had been so foolish. They took their place among the lesser packs, far from the raised dais where the great alphas sat. Neve kept her eyes down, her long blonde hair falling forward to hide the scars that traced her left cheek and neck. 3 jagged lines, pale against her skin, a permanent reminder of the rogue attack 2 years ago. The attack that had left her unconscious for 3 days. The attack that had made her pack look at her differently, as if trauma were contagious. "The assembly will come to order," the voice boomed from the dais, and Neve glanced up despite herself. Alpha King Malachi of the Blood Crown Empire stood before his throne, and even from this distance, his presence was overwhelming. He towered over every wolf in the hall, his shoulders broad beneath a cloak of white wolf fur. A crown of twisted gold sat upon his dark hair, and his eyes, those legendary golden eyes, surveyed the assembly with an intensity that made Neve's breath catch. They said he had killed his own father to take the throne. They said he had survived trials that would break lesser wolves. They said he had never taken a mate because no she-wolf could match his strength. Looking at him now, Neve believed every legend. The assembly proceeded with tedious formality. Territorial disputes were settled. Trade agreements were negotiated. Neve's mind drifted until Riker suddenly stood, and the mate bond pulled her to her feet as well. "Alpha King Malachi," Riker called out, his voice carrying across the hall. "The Moonstone Pack requests acknowledgement of a fated mate bond." Neve's heart lurched. Was he finally going to claim her publicly? After months of delays and excuses, was he ready to make her his Luna? Hope fluttered in her chest like a caged bird. "Approach," Malachi commanded, settling back into his throne with casual authority. They walked toward the dais, and with each step, Neve felt hundreds of eyes upon her. She heard the whispers start, soft and vicious. That's her, the scarred one. Moonstone must be desperate. I heard she was damaged by rogues. Poor thing. Neve forced herself to breathe. Riker would defend her. The mate bond would protect her. She clung to that belief even as her hands began to tremble. They reached the base of the dais, and Neve dropped into a curtsy as Riker bowed. When she rose, she found Malachi's golden eyes fixed on her with an unreadable expression. Up close, she could see the scars that crossed his own face, a thin line through his left eyebrow, another along his jaw. The marks of a survivor, not a victim. "Speak your claim," Malachi said, his deep voice sending shivers down Neve's spine. Riker cleared his throat. "6 months ago, the moon goddess blessed me with a fated mate. However, after careful consideration and consultation with my pack council, I have determined that this bond is incompatible with my duties as Alpha." The world tilted. Neve stared at Riker's profile, certain she had misheard. The mate bond pulsed with sudden pain, as if sensing what was coming. "I, Riker of Moonstone, reject you, Neve Ashwood, as my fated mate." His voice rang clear and cold through the great hall. "The Moonstone pack deserves a perfect Luna, not damaged goods. A leader's mate must be unblemished, whole, capable of representing our pack with pride. You are none of these things." The words struck like physical blows. Neve couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stand frozen as Riker continued his systematic destruction of her worth before hundreds of witnesses. "Your scars mark you as weak. Your trauma makes you unsuitable. I cannot bind myself eternally to someone so fundamentally broken." He turned to face her then, and there was nothing in his eyes. No regret, no pain, no recognition of the bond that was now tearing itself apart inside her chest. "I reject this bond and release you from any claim upon me." The golden thread between them didn't just break, it shattered. Neve gasped as pain exploded through her body, dropping her to her knees on the cold marble floor. The rejection of a fated bond was rare, almost unheard of, because the agony of it could kill. She felt like her soul was being ripped in half, like every nerve was on fire. Through the haze of pain, she heard the murmurs of the crowd. "He's right to reject her. What Alpha would want damaged goods? She should be grateful he waited this long." Neve's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She had survived the rogue attack. She had survived her pack's rejection. She would survive this too, even if she had to do it on her knees, alone and broken before the entire werewolf world. Then a shadow fell across her, massive and warm. "She is not broken." The voice was thunder and velvet, power and promise. "She is forged in fire." Neve looked up through her tears to find Alpha King Malachi standing before her, having descended from his throne. His golden eyes blazed with something that looked like fury, but it wasn't directed at her. He turned to face the assembly, and his voice carried to every corner of the hall. "I claim her as my chosen mate." The silence was absolute. Even Neve's pain seemed to pause in shock. Malachi turned back to her and extended his hand. His palm was scarred, she noticed, marked by old wounds that had healed into silver lines. "You are not broken," he said, his voice softening. "You are exactly what I need." He leaned closer, and his next words were for her alone, a promise breathed into the space between them. "And I will prove it to you every day until you believe it." Neve stared at his hand, at the choice he was offering. Behind her, Riker sputtered in outrage. Around her, the assembly erupted in shocked whispers. But in front of her stood the most powerful Alpha alive, seeing her not as damaged, but as valuable. Her hand shook as she placed it in his. His grip was warm, steady, absolutely certain. He lifted her to her feet with gentle strength, and for the first time in years, Neve stood before the world not in shame, but in hope. The Blood Crown Palace rose from the mountainside like a crown of stone and steel, its towers piercing the clouds. Neve pressed her face to the carriage window as they climbed the winding road, her breath fogging the glass. She had never seen anything so massive, so impossibly grand. The Moonstone territory could fit inside the palace grounds 10 times over. "It's overwhelming at first," Malachi said from across the carriage. He had ridden beside her in comfortable silence for most of the journey, giving her space to process everything that had happened. But it becomes home eventually. Home, the word felt foreign. Neve hadn't had a real home since before the attack, since before her own pack started treating her like a burden to be pitied or avoided. The carriage rolled through gates guarded by warriors twice the size of any wolf she had known. They saluted Malachi with fists over hearts, their eyes curious but not cruel as they glanced at her. No whispers, no judgment, just professional acknowledgement. The entry hall stole what remained of Neve's composure. Marble columns soared toward a ceiling painted with celestial scenes, the moon goddess in silver, surrounded by stars. Tapestries depicting legendary battles hung between torches that burned with flames that never seemed to diminish. Everything spoke of power, history, permanence. "Your chambers are in the east wing," Malachi said, gesturing for her to follow. His boots echoed on the polished floor. "You'll have complete privacy. The rooms connect to mine through a shared sitting area, but your door has a lock on the inside." Neve's steps faltered. A lock on the inside. Control over who entered her space. Such a small thing, but it meant everything. They climbed a grand staircase, turned down a corridor lined with portraits of previous Alpha Kings, all of them fierce, none as imposing as the man walking beside her. Finally, Malachi stopped before ornate double doors carved with images of wolves running beneath a full moon. "These are yours," he said simply, and pushed the doors open. Neve stepped into luxury she had only imagined in dreams. The main chamber was larger than her entire cottage in Moonstone. A four-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in deep blue silk. Windows overlooked mountains that seemed to touch the sky. A fireplace already crackled with welcoming warmth. There was a writing desk, a wardrobe that stood open to reveal gowns in every color, a bathing room visible through another door with a tub large enough to swim in. "I don't," Neve's voice caught. "This is too much." "This is what you deserve." Malachi remained in the doorway, respecting the threshold of her space. "My staff prepared everything. If anything doesn't suit you, tell me and it will be changed. This is your sanctuary, Neve. No one enters without your permission, not even me." She turned to face him, this powerful alpha who had claimed her before the world but now promised her autonomy. "Why are you doing this?" His golden eyes held her steadily. "Because you've been treated like property your entire life. I won't add to that." He stepped back into the corridor. "Rest. Dinner is at sunset in my private dining room, but you're not required to attend. A maid will bring food to your chambers if you prefer." "I'll come," Neve said quickly, surprising herself. Something about his respect made her want to be brave. A slight smile touched his scarred face. "Good. I'll send someone to guide you when it's time." True to his word, a young woman with kind eyes knocked on Neve's door as the sun painted the mountains gold. She introduced herself as Alina, led Neve through corridors that seemed designed to confuse invaders, and finally to a smaller, more intimate room where Malachi waited. He had changed from his formal regalia into simple black clothing that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. The dining table was set for two, the plates already filled with roasted meat, fresh bread, and vegetables that steamed in the firelight. "I wasn't sure what you liked," Malachi admitted, pulling out her chair before taking his own seat across from her. "So I asked the kitchen to prepare everything." Neve stared at the abundance. In Moonstone, she had eaten whatever scraps remained after everyone else finished. "This is, thank you." They ate in companionable silence for a while. Malachi didn't push conversation, didn't demand anything. Finally, Neve found her voice. "What happens now?" He set down his fork, giving her his full attention. "That depends on you. You're not a prisoner or a prize, Neve. You're my guest until you decide if you want this life. If you choose to stay, I'll court you properly. If you choose to leave, I'll provide you with resources to start anywhere you wish. A house, money, protection, your choice." "You claimed me as your mate," Neve said carefully. "Before everyone." "I claimed you as my chosen mate," Malachi corrected. "Not fated, not forced. Chosen. That means we both have to choose it continuously. I won't trap you with bonds you don't want. Something in Neve's chest loosened, a knot she hadn't known was there. I don't understand you. You will, he promised, given time. A knock interrupted them. A grizzled warrior entered, bowing quickly. Apologies, Alpha King. The council requests your presence. Border dispute between Shadowfang and Riverrun has escalated. Malachi's jaw tightened. Now. They're threatening violence. He stood, then paused, looking at Neve. Would you like to join me? You're not obligated, but the council chamber is where the real work of ruling happens. You might find it interesting. Neve should have said no, should have retreated to her safe chambers, but something in his casual invitation, the assumption that she might have valuable presence, might want to engage, made her stand. Yes, I'll come. The council chamber was all dark wood and stern faces. 10 wolves sat around a massive table marked with a map of the territories. They looked up in surprise when Malachi entered with Neve at his side. Gentlemen, Malachi said, this is Neve Ashwood. She'll be observing tonight. He pulled out a chair for her before taking his own at the head of the table. The wolves exchanged glances but said nothing. The debate began. Shadowfang claimed Riverrun had diverted a stream, destroying their grazing lands. Riverrun insisted the stream's natural course had shifted. Both sides wanted Blood Crown to intervene. Neve listened as the council argued back and forth, proposing solutions that seemed to favor one side or the other. Finally, unable to help herself, she spoke. What if neither pack is lying? Silence fell, every eye turned to her. Malachi leaned forward, his expression interested. Explain. If the stream's course shifted naturally, Riverrun isn't at fault, but Shadowfang still loses their grazing land through no fault of their own. Neve's fingers traced the map, following the blue line marking the water. What if Blood Crown provides engineers to help Shadowfang dig irrigation channels from the new stream location? Riverrun maintains their innocence, Shadowfang gets their water back, and both packs owe loyalty to the Empire for solving the problem. The council stared. Then the eldest warrior, a gray-bearded wolf named Marcus, laughed. By the goddess, the girl's right. Why are we trying to assign blame when we could be building alliances? Malachi's smile was slow and warm. Sound strategy. Marcus, send word to both packs. We'll fund the irrigation project. His eyes found Neve's across the table. Well reasoned. Heat rose to her cheeks, but it wasn't shame. It was pride. Over the next hour, 3 more disputes were discussed, and each time, Malachi turned to Neve for her perspective. Her insights were practical, focused on preservation rather than punishment. The council's initial skepticism transformed into respect. When they finally adjourned, Malachi walked Neve back toward her chambers. You have a gift for seeing solutions others miss. I spent years being invisible, Neve said quietly. You learn to observe when no one's watching you. I'm watching now, his voice was gentle, and I see someone remarkable. At her door, Neve turned to face him. Thank you, for today, for treating me like I matter. You do matter. Malachi's hand lifted, hovering near her scarred cheek but not touching. These scars, they prove you survived. That makes you stronger than most wolves in that council room. Don't let anyone tell you different. Neve's throat tightened with emotion. Good night, Malachi. Good night, Neve. He stepped back, giving her space. Tomorrow, if you're willing, I'd like to show you the rest of the palace, help you find your place here. She smiled, tentative but real. I'd like that. As she closed the door, her door, with her lock, Neve realized something had shifted. For the first time since the attack, since the rejection, since everything that had tried to break her, she felt a spark of something dangerous. Hope. The war room smelled of leather, parchment, and tension. Neve stood beside Malachi at the massive oak table, studying the map spread before them. Red markers indicated recent attacks along the southern border, 3 villages burned, 2 supply caravans destroyed, 17 wolves killed or missing. Shadowfang raiders, growled Commander Thuron, a scarred veteran with silver threading his dark hair. They strike at dawn, burn everything, and vanish before our patrols arrive. We've tripled the guard, but they're always one step ahead. Malachi's jaw was tight, his golden eyes tracking the pattern of attacks. They're testing us, seeing how far they can push before we retaliate in force. Then we should retaliate, another advisor argued. Send our full army south, show them the price of defying Blood Crown. And leave our northern border exposed, Neve heard herself say. Every head turned toward her. Heat crept up her neck, but she forced herself to continue. Look at the timing. The attack started 3 weeks ago, exactly when your northern treaty negotiations began. Shadowfang wants you to move your forces south. Malachi's eyes sharpened. Go on. Neve's finger traced the map, connecting the raids in a pattern she'd noticed. They're not random. Each attack is exactly half a day's ride from the last. They're hurting your response, forcing you to spread your forces thin along this entire stretch. She pointed to an unmarked valley between 2 attack sites. If you send armies to guard every village, you'll have no concentrated force. But if you fortify this valley, here you create a choke point. The raiders have to pass through it to continue their pattern. Commander Thuron leaned forward, studying the map with new interest. The Widow's Pass, narrow terrain, high cliffs on both sides. You'd see them coming, Neve said, and they'd have nowhere to run. Silence filled the room. Then Malachi smiled, sharp and fierce. Thuron, how many warriors can we position in that valley without alerting Shadowfang's scouts? 200, maybe more if we move them at night through the mountain paths. Do it, set the trap. Malachi's hand settled on Neve's shoulder, warm and approving. Well seen. The advisor who'd suggested full retaliation stared at Neve with something between shock and grudging respect. That's actually brilliant. Where did a Moonstone wolf learn tactical strategy? I didn't. Neve met his gaze steadily. I learned to recognize patterns because my survival depended on it. When you're considered weak, you have to be smarter. Over the next week, Neve found herself increasingly present in the war room. Malachi asked her opinion on supply routes, defensive positions, even diplomatic correspondence. His advisor's initial skepticism faded as her insights proved valuable again and again. The trap at Widow's Pass worked exactly as predicted. Shadowfang raiders rode straight into the ambush, and Blood Crown warriors captured 37 wolves without a single casualty. The southern raids stopped immediately. Your strategy saved lives, Malachi told her that evening as they walked the palace battlements. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of amber and rose. My advisors are calling you the ghost tactician, the enemy you see coming before they arrive. Neve laughed, the sound still unfamiliar to her own ears. That's ridiculous. That's accurate. He stopped, turning to face her. The wind caught his dark hair, and his golden eyes reflected the dying light. You have a gift, Neve, not just for strategy but for seeing what others miss. It's extraordinary. It's survival, she corrected quietly. Nothing more. Then you're the strongest wolf I know, Malachi said simply. The next morning, Captain Lyra of the Royal Guard found Neve in the library. The warrior woman was tall, muscled, with a scar bisecting her right eyebrow. The Alpha King suggested you might benefit from combat training. Neve's stomach tightened. I know how to fight. I'm sure you do, but there's a difference between fighting to survive and fighting to win. Lyra's smile wasn't unkind. If you're going to be advising the king on military matters, you should understand what you're asking warriors to do. She had a point. Neve followed Lyra to the training grounds, where 24 royal guards were already drilling. They paused when the women entered, curiosity plain on their faces. Neve will be training with us, Lyra announced. No explanation, no apology. Pair up for sparring, Neve, you're with me. The captain handed her a practice sword, wooden but weighted to feel real. Neve tested its balance, muscle memory from her attack flowing back. The rogue who'd scarred her hadn't been her first fight. Her father had taught her basic combat before he died. The attack had just reminded her how much more she needed to learn. Lyra didn't go easy on her. The captain's first strike came fast and hard, testing Neve's reflexes. Neve blocked, barely, the impact jarring her arms. They circled each other, and Neve noticed the guards had stopped their own training to watch. The next exchange was faster. Lyra pressed forward with relentless precision, and Neve gave ground, blocking and dodging. Pain flared in old injuries, but she pushed through it. She'd survived worse than bruises. Then Lyra overextended slightly, a tiny opening. Neve didn't think, just moved. She slipped inside the captain's guard, hooked her foot behind Lyra's knee, and used the warrior's momentum to take her down. They both hit the ground, but Neve's practice blade pressed against Lyra's throat. Shocked silence. Then Lyra laughed, genuinely delighted. "By the goddess, you're fast. Where did you learn that move?" "I didn't learn it." Neve stood, offering her hand. "I figured out that big opponents expect you to match their strength. They don't expect you to use it against them." Lyra clasped her hand, pulling herself up. "Again, and this time I'm not holding back." They trained for 2 hours. Neve lost more fights than she won, but she won enough to earn respect. Her slight frame was a disadvantage in raw strength, but she was faster than most of the guards, more flexible, and utterly fearless. Pain had long since lost its power to stop her. When they finally paused for water, Neve's muscles screamed and sweat soaked through her training clothes. But she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Malachi appeared at the edge of the training ground, watching with those intense golden eyes. "Impressive." "She's got natural talent," Lyra said. "Rough around the edges, but instinct you can't teach. Give me a month, and she'll hold her own against anyone in this guard." "I believe it." Malachi approached, his gaze tracking the new bruises forming on Neve's arms. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Neve rolled her shoulders, testing the soreness. "Better than fine." "You fight like someone with everything to lose," Malachi observed quietly. "I fight like someone who's already lost everything," Neve corrected. "There's nothing left to be afraid of." His expression shifted, something like pain crossing his features. "Neve." "Pain taught me to fight," she interrupted, needing him to understand. "The attack, the rejection, all of it. I learned that if you're going to survive, you can't wait for someone to save you. You save yourself." Malachi was silent for a long moment. Then he stepped closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You're right. Pain is an excellent teacher, but you don't have to face everything alone anymore. That's what I'm offering you, partnership, not rescue." Something in Neve's chest cracked open, warmth flooding in. That evening, Malachi found her in the library again, surrounded by military treatises and strategic maps. He carried 2 glasses and a bottle of dark amber liquid. "You've been working all day," he said, pouring drinks. "You're allowed to rest." "I like working." Neve accepted the glass, the liquor burning pleasantly down her throat. "For the first time in my life, I feel useful, valued." Malachi settled into the chair across from her, his expression serious. "I have a proposition. My council needs a strategic advisor, someone who sees patterns, thinks differently, understands both combat and diplomacy. The position is yours if you want it." Neve's breath caught. That's a real position, real authority." "You've already been doing the work. This just makes it official." He leaned forward. "I'm not offering this because I claimed you as my mate. I'm offering it because you're exceptionally qualified. You've proven your value a dozen times over." "The council will object. A she-wolf in a position of military authority." "The council respects competence. You've already won them over." His smile was warm. "Besides, I'm the Alpha King. I don't need their permission." Neve looked down at her scarred hands, remembering when she'd believed these marks made her worthless. Now they were just part of her story, not the whole story. "Yes," she said, meeting his golden eyes. "I'll do it." "Good." Malachi raised his glass. "To new beginnings and old scars, may they both make us stronger." Neve clinked her glass against his, and for the first time since the rejection, she believed in more than just survival. She believed in purpose. The palace gardens transformed at twilight, when the last rays of sun painted the flowers gold, and the first stars emerged like scattered diamonds. Neve walked the stone paths alone, breathing in jasmine and night-blooming roses, seeking solace in the quiet beauty. She had spent the day in council meetings, her new role as strategic advisor still feeling surreal, and her mind needed peace. "I thought I might find you here." Malachi's voice came from behind her, warm and unhurried. He moved through the gardens like he belonged to them, his presence somehow both commanding and comfortable. Neve turned, finding him dressed simply in dark trousers and a loose white shirt, his crown absent. Without the regalia of kingship, he looked younger, more approachable. More human, though there was nothing human about the power that radiated from him. "I hope I'm not intruding on your sanctuary," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "You're not." Neve surprised herself with the truth of it. "The gardens are beautiful. I've never seen anything like them." "My mother planted most of these." Malachi gestured to the roses climbing a nearby trellis. "She said a palace needed softness to balance the stone and steel. After she died, I made sure they were maintained exactly as she designed them." There was grief in his voice, old but not forgotten. Neve understood that kind of grief, the kind that became part of you, woven into your bones. They walked together in comfortable silence, following paths that wound between flowering hedges and marble fountains. The moon rose, full and bright, casting silver light across everything. "May I ask you something?" Malachi's voice was careful, as if approaching something fragile. "The scars on your face and neck, you don't have to tell me, but I'd like to know the story, if you're willing to share it." Neve's hand lifted unconsciously to trace the jagged lines on her cheek. She had spent 2 years avoiding this conversation, deflecting questions, hiding behind her hair. But something about the twilight, about Malachi's patient presence, made her want to speak the truth aloud. "It was 2 years ago," she began, her voice steadier than she expected. "I was gathering herbs in the forest at dawn. My pack's healer needed them for medicines. I was alone, which was against the rules, but I was always alone by then anyway." She paused, remembering the morning mist, the quiet peace before everything shattered. 3 rogue wolves. They came out of nowhere. I tried to run, but they were faster." Malachi's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, just listened. "The leader caught me first. His claws." Neve touched her scars again. "I fought back. My father taught me basic combat before he died, and I wasn't going to die quietly. I managed to wound one of them badly enough that the others hesitated. That hesitation saved my life. A patrol heard the fighting and arrived before they could finish me." "You survived through your own strength," Malachi said quietly. "Not luck, not rescue, your own will to live." "The pack didn't see it that way." Bitterness crept into Neve's voice. "They saw a she-wolf who'd broken the rules, who'd been attacked, who bore visible scars. I became a reminder of danger, of vulnerability. They started treating me like I was damaged, contaminated somehow, like trauma could spread through touch." She stopped walking, facing a fountain where water cascaded over smooth stones. Her reflection rippled in the pool below, scarred, but still recognizably herself. "Then the fated bond snapped into place with Riker 6 months ago. I thought it was salvation. The moon goddess giving me a second chance, proving I wasn't worthless." Her laugh was hollow. "But Riker looked at me the same way the pack did. Maybe worse, because he was bound to me against his will. He started making excuses. We needed to wait for the right political moment. His pack wasn't ready for a scarred Luna. I needed to heal first. As if my scars were temporary. As if I could become someone else, if I just tried hard enough." "You deserved better," Malachi said, and there was steel in his voice. "From all of them." "I survived," Neve said simply. "That's what I do." Malachi moved closer, his presence warm in the cooling night air. "Neve, look at me." She turned, finding his golden eyes intense with emotion. "Survival isn't just existing," he said. "It's not enough to merely breathe and endure. You deserve to live fully, to be valued for exactly who you are, scars and strength and everything between. Anyone who made you feel otherwise was a fool." Tears burned behind Neve's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Why do you care? You barely know me." "Because I recognize you." Malachi's hand lifted, hovering near her scarred cheek without touching. "I see myself in you, Neve, the parts of me I thought I had to hide to be accepted." "You're the Alpha King," Neve said, confusion threading through her voice. You're the most powerful wolf alive. What could you possibly have to hide? Instead of answering, Malachi stepped back and began unbuttoning his shirt. Neve's breath caught as he shrugged it off, turning to show her his back. The scars were extensive, dozens of them, crisscrossing his skin in a map of old violence. Some were thin and precise, like blade cuts. Others were ragged, clearly made by claws. They covered his back from shoulders to waist, layered over each other in a testament to repeated brutality. My father, Malachi said, his voice carefully controlled, believed that strength came from cruelty, that to rule effectively an alpha had to inspire fear above all else. He tried to teach me this lesson through practical demonstration. Neve's hand covered her mouth, horror and recognition warring inside her. I was 15 when I refused to execute a prisoner who'd stolen food to feed his family. My father said mercy was weakness. I said justice required understanding context. He had me whipped in front of the entire pack, 30 lashes to teach me obedience. Malachi's shoulders tensed, muscles shifting beneath the scars. It didn't work. I kept refusing his orders, kept challenging his methods. The scars accumulated. He turned back to face her, pulling his shirt on but leaving it unbuttoned. When I was 20, he ordered me to kill a rival alpha's child, a boy of 12, to prevent future challenges. I refused. He cast me out, declared me unfit, sent assassins to ensure I never returned to claim the throne. But you did return, Neve whispered. I spent 3 years in exile, surviving in the wilderness, training with warriors from distant packs who believed in a different kind of strength. I learned that true power doesn't come from making others fear you. It comes from making them believe in you. His golden eyes met hers. When I finally challenged my father, I won, but not because I was crueler, because I was better. And the pack accepted you. Not immediately. I had to prove myself over and over. Every decision was scrutinized, every mercy questioned. They expected me to become him, to embrace the brutality they'd always known. Malachi's smile was bitter. I spent years being told I was too soft, too damaged by exile, too broken to truly rule, that I should have died in the wilderness where I belonged. The parallels hit Neve like a physical blow. They called you broken. Constantly, for years. He stepped closer, and now his hand did touch her face, fingertips gentle against her scarred cheek. So when I see you, strong, intelligent, resilient despite everything that's tried to destroy you, I don't see damage, Neve. I see someone who refused to let cruelty define them, someone who survived and came out sharper, not diminished. Neve's breath shuddered. I thought I was alone in this. You're not. Malachi's thumb traced the edge of her scar with reverence, not pity. We're the same. You and I, we carry our pain where others can see it. And instead of making us weak, it's made us capable of recognizing strength in unexpected places. Something shifted between them in that moment, something deeper than attraction or convenience. Recognition, true and bone deep. They were both survivors of different wars, both scarred by the cruelty of those who should have protected them, both determined to be more than what pain had tried to make them. Thank you, Neve said softly, for telling me, for showing me. Thank you for listening. Malachi's hand fell away, but his presence remained close. I've never told anyone the full story. My advisors know pieces, but not all of it. Not like this. Why tell me? Because you deserve to know that you're not the only one who's been called broken and had to prove otherwise. His smile was gentle. And because I need you to understand that when I look at you, I see exactly who you are, and she's magnificent. They stood together as night deepened around them, two wolves who'd learned that surviving wasn't the same as living, but who were finally, slowly, learning the difference. The moon shone down on them both, and for the first time, Neve felt like her scars were not marks of shame, but medals of honor. Proof that she'd fought and won. The warning came at dawn. Commander Thuron burst into the war room where Neve and Malachi were reviewing supply routes, his face grim with urgency. Alpha King, Moonstone warriors approached the gates, 50 strong, armed and demanding entrance. Their alpha claims mate rights. Neve's blood turned to ice. The maps before her blurred as her heart hammered against her ribs. She knew, even before Thuron spoke the name, who had come. Riker, she whispered. Malachi's hand found hers beneath the table, his grip steady and warm. He has no rights here, none that I recognize. He'll claim the fated bond gives him authority, Neve said, adding the tremor in her voice. She had built so much strength over these past weeks, found purpose and value and the beginning of healing. But Riker's presence threatened to drag her back into that dark place where she was nothing but damaged goods. Then we'll remind him that he rejected that bond publicly. Malachi stood, his expression hardening into something deadly. In front of hundreds of witnesses, he doesn't get to change his mind now that you've found worth elsewhere. He turned to Thuron. Admit them to the throne room, full formal reception. I want every advisor present, Captain Lyra and 20 guards. Let Moonstone see exactly who they're challenging. Within the hour, the great hall was prepared. Malachi sat upon his throne, crown gleaming in the morning light, white furs draped across his shoulders. He looked every inch the legendary Alpha King, powerful, ancient, untouchable. His advisors flanked him in formal regalia. Captain Lyra and her guards lined the walls, hands resting on sword hilts. Neve stood to Malachi's right, positioned as an honored advisor rather than hidden away. She had chosen her clothing carefully, a deep green dress that spoke of authority, her hair pulled back to display her scars rather than hide them. If Riker had come to reclaim damaged goods, he would find instead a woman who'd learned her own value. The great doors opened. Riker strode in, flanked by 20 warriors in moonstone colors. He looked exactly as Neve remembered, sharp-featured, green eyes cold, movements precise and controlled. Behind him walked his beta, Marcus, and several pack enforcers she recognized from her time there. They stopped at the base of the dais. Riker's eyes found Neve immediately, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, at her transformation, or anger at her defiance. Alpha King Malachi, Riker began, his voice carrying through the hall with practiced authority. I come to reclaim what is mine by right of the fated bond. Neve Ashwood is my mate, chosen by the moon goddess herself. I demand her immediate return to Moonstone territory. Malachi's expression remained utterly calm, but Neve felt the leashed violence in him, coiled and ready. She is not yours to reclaim. The fated bond was rejected. Malachi's voice cut through Riker's protest like a blade. Publicly, before the entire Grand Assembly and every pack leader in attendance, you called her damaged goods, unworthy, too broken to be your Luna, or have you forgotten your own words? Riker's jaw tightened. I spoke in haste, influenced by poor counsel. The bond remains regardless of my temporary lapse in judgment. Temporary? Neve heard herself speak, her voice ringing clear and strong. Every eye turned to her. She descended 2 steps, bringing herself level with Riker's gaze. You spent 6 months avoiding me, making excuses, treating me like a shameful secret. You rejected our bond with absolute clarity. There was nothing temporary about your cruelty. Riker's expression shifted to something approximating remorse, but Neve saw the calculation behind it. I made a mistake, Neve. I see that now. Come home. We can fix this. I am home. The words came easily, truthfully. You don't get to reclaim what you threw away. I'm your fated mate, Riker snarled, his facade of contrition cracking. The moon goddess herself bound us. That bond transcends your hurt feelings or his interference. He jabbed a finger toward Malachi. Moon law is clear. A fated mate has rights that supersede any claim, even from an Alpha King. Moon law is also clear about rejection, Commander Thuron interjected, stepping forward with a leather-bound tome. Chapter 7, verse 12. A bond publicly severed cannot be reclaimed without the consent of both parties. The rejected mate owes no obligation to the one who cast them aside. He looked up from the ancient text. You severed the bond, Alpha Riker. She owes you nothing. Riker's face darkened with rage. You hide behind legal technicalities while stealing another Alpha's mate. This is an act of war. This is an act of choice. Malachi rose from his throne, descending the dais with lethal grace. He moved like violence barely contained, and even Riker's warriors shifted nervously. Neve chose to stay. She chooses to remain. Her choice is the only one that matters here. She's confused, manipulated by your power and resources, Riker insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. You're using her to strengthen your political position, making her believe she matters when she's just. Just what? Neve interrupted, stepping between Malachi and Riker. Say it, just broken, just damaged, just worthless. Her voice rose with each word. That's what you think, isn't it? That I should be grateful for any attention, even from the alpha who publicly humiliated me. That's not. You don't get to decide my worth anymore, Riker. You gave up that right when you rejected me in front of the entire werewolf world. Neve's hands clenched at her sides. I have value. I have purpose. I have strength you never bothered to see because you were too busy being ashamed of my scars. Those scars mark you as weak, Riker spat, his true feelings finally surfacing. They prove you couldn't defend yourself, couldn't? These scars prove I survived. Neve's voice cut through his words like steel. I fought 3 rogues alone and lived. I endured your rejection and found strength in it. I've proven my worth to warriors, advisors, and a king who sees value where you saw only shame. My scars are not my weakness, Riker. Your blindness is yours. Silence fell across the throne room. Even Riker's own warriors looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight and avoiding eye contact. Malachi moved to stand beside Neve, a united front, his golden eyes fixed on Riker with predatory intensity. You've heard her answer. She stays, by choice, by right, by every law that matters. This isn't over, Riker said, his voice low and dangerous. Moonstone won't forget this insult. You've made an enemy today, Alpha King. I've made many enemies. Malachi's smile was sharp as broken glass. They all learned the same lesson eventually. Try to take what's mine, and I'll show you exactly how I earned this throne. Blood Crown has stood for centuries. Your pack numbers 50 warriors. Do the mathematics. You threaten war over 1 female. I defend a member of my court from harassment. Malachi's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. And if you think I won't go to war to protect those under my protection, you understand nothing about me. Test me, Riker, please. I would enjoy the excuse. The air in the throne room crackled with tension. Riker's warriors had gone pale, clearly understanding they stood in the presence of something far more dangerous than their alpha had anticipated. This violates every tradition, Riker tried one last time. Every pack law regarding fated mates. You violated those laws when you rejected her, Neve said softly. You broke our bond. You threw me away. Now you face the consequences of that choice. Riker stared at her for a long moment, and Neve saw the exact instant he realized he'd lost. Not just this battle, but any claim he'd ever had to her. The fated bond that had once thrummed between them was truly gone, severed beyond repair. You'll regret this, he said finally, but the words lacked conviction. No, Neve replied. I really won't. Riker turned sharply, gesturing for his warriors to follow. They retreated toward the doors, but at the threshold, he paused and looked back at Malachi. This isn't finished. Moonstone has alliances, resources. We're not as insignificant as you think. Then prove it, Malachi said calmly. But know this, if you return to my territory, if you threaten what's mine again, I won't be so diplomatic. The next time we meet, one of us won't leave alive. Riker's face twisted with fury, but he said nothing more. The doors closed behind Moonstone's warriors with a hollow boom that echoed through the hall. Neve released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her legs trembled with reaction, adrenaline finally ebbing. Malachi's hand found her elbow, steadying her. You were magnificent. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. His golden eyes searched her face. Are you all right? Yes, and surprisingly it was true. Facing Riker hadn't destroyed her, it had freed her. I'm better than all right. Commander Thuron approached, his expression grim. Alpha King, I don't trust his retreat. Moonstone may seek alliances to challenge us. Let them try. Malachi's arm came around Neve's shoulders, a gesture of protection and partnership. We'll be ready. But as Neve leaned into his strength, She couldn't shake the echo of Riker's final words. This wasn't finished. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew he would return. And next time, he wouldn't come asking. The attack came 3 nights later, under a moonless sky when shadows pooled deepest in the palace corners. Neve woke to the sound of screams and the acrid smell of smoke. She bolted upright in bed, her heart hammering as alarm bells shattered the night's silence. The door to her chambers burst open. Malachi stood there, already in combat gear, blood splattered across his chest, not his own, judging by the fierce vitality in his golden eyes. Shadowfang raiders breached the eastern wall, he said, his voice urgent but controlled. 50 at least, maybe more. This is a coordinated assault. His jaw tightened. Riker's alliance, it has to be. Neve was already moving, pulling on the leather combat gear Captain Lyra had insisted she keep in her chambers. Where do you need me? The tower, highest point, most defensible. Malachi grabbed her arm, his grip almost painful. Neve, this isn't a border skirmish. They came for blood, for you. Promise me you'll stay safe. I'm not hiding, Weil. Promise me. His eyes blazed with something beyond command, beyond strategy, fear, raw and human. I can't fight effectively if I'm terrified for you, please. She had never heard him say please before. I promise. They ran through corridors filled with smoke and chaos. Blood Crown warriors engaged raiders at every turn, the clash of steel, the snarls of wolves shifting mid-combat, the screams of the wounded. Malachi cut through enemies like they were nothing, his movements fluid and lethal, protecting Neve as they fought toward the tower. They reached the base of the spiral staircase. Commander Thuron stood there with 5 guards, holding the entrance against a wave of attackers. Get her up, Malachi commanded, then turned to face the oncoming raiders. I'll hold here. Malachi. Go, his voice cracked like thunder. Neve ran, taking the stone steps 2 at a time, Thuron and 2 guards flanking her. Behind them, she heard Malachi's roar as he engaged the enemy, the sound more beast than man. They burst onto the tower's top platform. The view revealed the full scope of the attack, fires burning in 3 sections of the palace, raiders swarming through breaches in the walls, Blood Crown warriors fighting desperately to contain them. Seal the door, Thuron ordered. 1 guard moved to bar the heavy wooden door while the other took position at the top of the stairs. Then Neve heard it, footsteps, multiple sets coming from above. Impossible. They were at the highest point. The roof access, Thuron breathed, realization dawning too late. Raiders dropped from the tower's peaked roof, landing with predatory grace on the platform. 6 of them, all bearing Shadowfang markings. And leading them, wearing a vicious smile, was a wolf Neve recognized from Riker's entourage. The broken Luna, the raider sneered. Alpha Riker sends his regards, said to tell you, if he can't have you, no one will. Thuron and his guards moved to intercept, but they were outnumbered. Steel clashed against steel. 1 guard went down immediately, his throat torn out. The other fought valiantly but was quickly overwhelmed. Thuron faced 3 raiders alone, his sword singing through the air. Run, he shouted at Neve. But there was nowhere to run. Raiders blocked every exit. Neve's hand found the blade Captain Lyra had made her carry. It felt impossibly light as she drew it, her training flooding back. Pain taught me to fight, she remembered telling Malachi. Now pain would have to be enough. The first raider lunged at her, claws extended. Neve dodged, using his momentum to drive her blade between his ribs. He collapsed, shocked. She yanked the weapon free, spinning to face the next attacker. 2 more came at once. She fought with desperate efficiency, every trick Lyra had taught her, every survival instinct honed by trauma. She was fast, fearless, but they were stronger. A claw raked across her arm, drawing blood. Another caught her shoulder, spinning her around. She killed 1 more before they overwhelmed her, pinning her against the tower's stone wall. A blade pressed against her throat. Should have stayed broken, the leader hissed. Then the door exploded inward. Malachi burst through like a force of nature, covered in blood and fury. His eyes had gone completely gold, the wolf rising to the surface. He moved with supernatural speed, tearing through raiders with lethal precision. But there were too many. As Malachi reached for Neve, one of the raiders, the leader, struck from behind. The blade slid between Malachi's ribs with a sickening sound, punching through armor and flesh. Time stopped. Malachi's eyes went wide with shock. He stumbled forward, and Neve caught him as he collapsed to his knees. Blood poured from the wound, too much blood, staining his chest crimson. "No," Neve whispered, her hands pressing against the injury. "No, no, no." The raider raised his blade for the killing blow. Neve didn't think. She shifted her body, covering Malachi's, taking the strike meant for him, but the blade never connected. Golden light erupted from her hands, so bright it was blinding. The raider screamed, thrown backward by invisible force. Power surged through Neve like nothing she'd ever felt. It poured from some deep well inside her, flooding through her veins like liquid fire. Her hands glowed with radiant light as she pressed them against Malachi's wound. She felt his pain, his life force ebbing. The blade had pierced his lung, severed arteries. A mortal wound. But the power flowing through her refused to accept that. It pushed into him, knitting flesh and bone, sealing vessels, forcing his body to heal at impossible speed. The golden light intensified, spreading from her hands across Malachi's entire body. It illuminated old scars, ancient injuries, and something else, something darker. A curse, woven into his very essence, black threads wrapped around his life force like chains. Neve saw it clearly in that moment of absolute clarity. The curse that had plagued the royal bloodline for 2 centuries, preventing heirs, weakening each generation. It clung to Malachi like rot. Without understanding how, Neve reached for those black threads and pulled. The curse fought back, trying to maintain its hold, but her power was absolute. The threads snapped one by one, dissolving into nothing as golden light consumed them. Malachi gasped, his back arching as the curse shattered. The ancient magic that had bound his bloodline screamed as it died, echoing across supernatural planes. Every wolf in the palace felt it, the breaking of something old and terrible. The light faded. Neve collapsed forward, exhausted beyond measure. Malachi caught her, his strength miraculously restored. The wound in his chest was gone, not even a scar remaining. "The curse," he breathed, his voice filled with wonder and disbelief. "I can feel it. It's gone. After 200 years, it's gone." Around them, the surviving raiders had fled or lay unconscious from the power's backlash. Commander Thuron stared from where he'd been fighting, his expression stunned. Neve looked up at Malachi, her hands still glowing faintly. "I don't understand. What did I do?" "You saved me." His hands cupped her face with infinite gentleness. "You saved my entire bloodline. The curse that prevented royal heirs, you broke it. You're a healer, Neve. Not just any healer, but one with the sacred gift, the rarest power in existence." Tears streamed down her face. "I couldn't let you die. I couldn't." He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, and full of everything they'd been dancing around for weeks. Neve kissed him back with equal intensity, her hands fisting in his blood-soaked shirt. The world narrowed to just this, his lips on hers, his heart beating strong beneath her palm, proof that he lived. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Malachi rested his forehead against hers. "My broken healer," he whispered. "You were never damaged. You were dormant, waiting for the right moment to become exactly what the world needed." "What we needed," Neve corrected softly. Around them, blood-crown warriors were securing the tower, tending to wounded, dealing with prisoners. The battle was over. They had won, though at terrible cost. But in that moment, holding each other on a blood-stained tower under emerging stars, Neve and Malachi had won something else entirely. Recognition had deepened into something more, something that felt like destiny choosing them as much as they chose each other. "The mating bond," Malachi said, wonder in his voice. "Can you feel it?" Neve could. A new thread, golden and strong, connecting her heart to his. Not the fated bond forced by fate, but something chosen, earned, built from shared darkness and mutual respect. Yes, she breathed. I feel it. Then let me say what I should have said weeks ago. His golden eyes held hers with absolute certainty. I love you, Neve, not despite your brokenness, but because every crack in you lets more light shine through. Marry me, be my queen, my mate, my equal. Neve's answer came without hesitation, from the deepest truth of her healing heart. Yes. The blood moon rose over the palace 7 nights after the battle, casting everything in shades of crimson and gold. The entire realm had gathered for the sacred mating ceremony, every pack leader, every elder, every wolf of significance within 1,000 miles. They filled the ceremonial grounds that stretched before the palace, thousands strong, their voices hushed with anticipation. Neve stood in her private chambers, staring at her reflection in the full-length mirror. The ceremonial robes were pure white, flowing like water over her body, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light. Her hair had been woven with moonflowers, their pale petals stark against her blonde locks. But it was her face that held her attention. The scars on her cheek and neck, normally hidden or downplayed, were now traced with silver paint that made them shimmer like lightning. You look like a warrior goddess, Captain Lyra said from the doorway, herself dressed in formal guard regalia. The kind that men write legends about. I look terrified, Neve corrected, though she smiled. That too, but terror and courage often wear the same face. Lyra crossed the room, adjusting the drape of Neve's robes. Every wolf in the realm is out there, Neve. They're not just witnessing a mating ceremony. They're witnessing the salvation of the royal bloodline, the breaking of an ancient curse. You've already become legend. The words should have made Neve's anxiety worse, but somehow they centered her. She wasn't just Neve Ashwood anymore, the broken she-wolf rejected by her fated mate. She was the healer who saved the Alpha King, the woman who shattered a 200-year curse, the survivor who proved that scars could be marks of strength. It's time, Alina said softly, appearing at the door. Neve took a deep breath and followed them out. The palace corridors were lined with blood-crowned warriors, each one dropping to one knee as she passed, a sign of deepest respect. She walked through their honor guard with her head high, her scars gleaming silver in the torchlight. The ceremonial grounds spread out beneath the full moon, a vast circle of ancient stones that predated even the palace. At its center stood an altar carved from a single piece of white marble, and before it waited Malachi. He wore the formal regalia of the Alpha King, black leather and silver armor, his white fur cloak flowing from his shoulders, the crown of twisted gold catching moonlight. But it was his eyes that held Neve's attention as she walked toward him through the parted crowd. Those golden eyes that had seen her worth when the world saw only damage. Eyes that looked at her now with love so fierce it stole her breath. The high priestess, an ancient she-wolf with silver hair and eyes that held centuries of wisdom, stood at the altar. Her voice carried across the gathered wolves with supernatural clarity. We gather under the blood moon to witness the sacred joining of souls. Alpha King Malachi of Blood Crown Empire and Neve Ashwood, healer of the sacred gift, come forward to be bound by moon and blood, by choice and destiny. Neve climbed the 3 steps to the altar platform. Malachi took her hand, his touch warm and steady. Together they turned to face the priestess. The old ways speak of true mates, the priestess intoned. Not merely fated by the goddess, but chosen by the heart. These two have walked through fire and emerged forged anew. Alpha King, do you claim this woman as your mate, your equal, your queen? I do. Malachi's voice rang clear and absolute. Before every wolf assembled here, before the moon goddess herself, I claim Neve as my true mate. She is my equal in strength, my superior in courage, my salvation in darkness. I offer her not just my protection, but my partnership, not just my throne, but my heart. The crowd murmured, the words more personal than traditional ceremony usually allowed. But this was no traditional ceremony. Neve Ashwood, the priestess turned to her, do you accept this claim? Do you choose this Alpha as your mate, your king, your equal? Neve's voice didn't waver. I do. I choose Malachi not because fate demanded it, but because my heart recognized him. He saw worth where others saw brokenness. He offered choice where others offered chains. I claim him as mine, as I am his. Then let the marking begin. The priestess held out a ceremonial blade, its edge gleaming silver. Malachi took the knife and drew it across his palm. Blood welled, dark and rich. He pressed his bleeding hand to Neve's heart, over the white robes, marking her with his essence. The ancient ritual words fell from his lips in the old tongue, words of binding and claiming. Then Neve felt it, the surge of supernatural power as Malachi's wolf rose to the surface. His eyes blazed pure gold, and he leaned forward, his teeth extending to sharp points. The marking bite, the most sacred and intimate part of the ceremony. His mouth found the junction of her neck and shoulder, and his teeth sank into her flesh. Pain and pleasure exploded through Neve simultaneously, but it was more than physical sensation. It was the mating bond snapping fully into place, blazing between them like a supernova. Golden light erupted from where they touched, visible to every watching wolf. The power of it made the ancient stones around them hum with resonance. Neve gasped as the bond settled into her soul, connecting her to Malachi in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. She felt his emotions, his love, his fierce protectiveness, his absolute certainty that she was his true mate. And through their connection, she felt something else. The absence of the curse, the freedom his bloodline now possessed, all because of her gift. When Malachi pulled back, his teeth released her flesh, and the wound immediately began to glow with that same golden light. It healed before the gathered crowd, leaving behind a silver scar in the perfect shape of his mark. Proof of their bond, visible to any wolf who looked upon her. The priestess raised her hands. Behold the true mates, bound by choice, blessed by the goddess, marked by power that breaks ancient curses and forges new destinies. I present to you Queen Neve of Bloodcrown Empire. The crowd erupted. Thousands of wolves howled in unison, the sound shaking the very ground. Pack leaders who had whispered about Neve's scars now knelt in respect. Warriors who had questioned her worth now saluted her as their queen. The transformation was complete, from rejected and broken to revered and powerful. Malachi pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that the entire realm witnessed. When they broke apart, he whispered against her mouth, "My queen, my mate, my miracle." "My king," Neve whispered back, "my choice, my home." The celebration began, music and dancing filling the ceremonial grounds. But as Neve and Malachi descended from the altar, accepting congratulations from pack leaders and dignitaries, she felt a prickling awareness at the base of her skull. Someone was watching, someone whose emotions weren't joy or celebration. Her eyes scanned the crowd and found him, Riker, standing at the very edge of the gathering, half hidden in shadows. His face was a mask of barely controlled rage, his green eyes fixed on her with such hatred it was almost physical. Neve's hand tightened on Malachi's arm. He followed her gaze. And his body tensed, with instant readiness for violence. But Riker didn't approach. He simply stood there, watching as the woman he'd rejected became a queen, as the broken she-wolf he'd thrown away became the most powerful healer in generations, as everything he'd dismissed as worthless transformed into legend. His lips moved, forming words Neve couldn't hear across the distance, but she didn't need to hear them to understand. This wasn't over. Then Shadowfang's beta appeared beside Riker, leaning close to whisper something. Riker's expression shifted from rage to something more calculated, more dangerous. He smiled, the expression cold and sharp, then melted back into the crowd. "He's planning something," Neve said quietly. "Let him plan." Malachi's arm came around her waist, protective and possessive. "You broke a 200-year curse with your gift. You're the most powerful healer alive, possibly the most powerful healer in history. And you're my mate, my queen, under the protection of the strongest empire in the realm." His golden eyes met hers. "Whatever Riker plans, we'll face it together." Neve leaned into his strength, feeling their bond pulse with certainty. She had survived rejection, attack, public humiliation, and a battle that should have killed them both. She had discovered power she never knew she possessed and love she never thought she deserved. Whatever came next, she would face it not as broken Neve who needed saving, but as Queen Neve who had learned to save herself. The blood moon shone down on them both, and the celebration continued deep into the night. But in the shadows at the edge of the firelight, alliances were forming and revenge was being planned. The story of the broken healer and her alpha king was far from over. The second blood moon rose exactly 1 month after the mating ceremony, its crimson light painting the world in shades of war and prophecy. The ancient texts spoke of twin blood moons as a time when old debts could be settled, when challenges could be issued that no alpha could refuse. Neve had read those texts in the palace library, a growing unease settling in her bones as the date approached. She stood beside Malachi on the ceremonial platform, now wearing the crown of the queen, delicate silver woven with moonstone that caught the red light. The gathered packs had returned for this sacred night, their numbers even greater than before. Blood moon ceremonies were rare enough, but twin moons came once in a generation. "He'll come tonight," Neve said quietly, her hand finding Malachi's. Through their mate bond, she felt his agreement, the coiled readiness for violence that hummed just beneath his calm exterior. "If he does, I'll end this." Malachi's voice was soft but lethal. "He threatened you, allied with Shadowfang against us. Whatever protection his position as Alpha once afforded him is gone." The High Priestess began the evening's rituals, blessing the gathered wolves, invoking the moon goddess's favor. Neve tried to focus on the words, but her attention kept drifting to the crowd, searching for a familiar face among thousands. Then she saw him. Riker stepped from the mass of wolves, walking with deliberate purpose toward the ceremonial circle. He wore formal challenge leather, the traditional garb of a wolf invoking ancient rites. Behind him walked not just Moonstone warriors, but others, Shadowfang markers, Riverrun colors, smaller packs she didn't recognize. He'd built a coalition. The High Priestess's voice cut off mid-blessing as Riker entered the sacred circle. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like wildfire. "I invoke the right of challenge," Riker called out, his voice carrying across the grounds with supernatural clarity. "Under the twin blood moons, witnessed by all packs, I challenge for what was stolen from me." Malachi's growl was barely human. He moved to descend from the platform, but the priestess raised her hand. "State your claim, challenger." "Neve Ashwood was my fated mate, bound by the moon goddess herself." Riker's eyes found Neve, and she saw madness lurking in their green depths. "That bond was never properly severed. Ancient law states that a fated bond can only be broken through mutual rejection. She never rejected me. She simply ran away with a more powerful male." "That's a lie," Neve said, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. "You rejected me publicly before the entire Grand Assembly." "I rejected the timing, not the bond," Riker countered smoothly. "I said we would wait, that the moment wasn't right, but I never severed our connection. The fated bond remained, dormant but present, until you allowed yourself to be marked by another." The crowd erupted in confused whispers. Neve felt Malachi's fury through their bond, his wolf rising to the surface. The priestess consulted with the elders flanking her, their ancient faces grave. Finally, she spoke. "The law is unclear in cases where rejection is partial or ambiguous. Under the twin blood moons, the challenger has the right to contest for a mate if the original bond was not formally severed by both parties." "This is insane," Malachi snarled. "She's my mate, my queen, marked and bonded." "And I challenge that claim." Riker's smile was vicious. "Trial by combat, winner takes the mate, ancient law that predates even Blood Crown Empire, you cannot refuse." "I accept." Malachi was already moving, descending from the platform with lethal grace. "I'll kill you for even suggesting." "Stop!" Neve's voice cut through both males with absolute authority. She descended the platform steps, her white queen's robes flowing around her like water, her crown catching the blood-red moonlight. "Both of you stop." She walked to the center of the ceremonial circle, feeling every eye upon her. The silver paint on her scars glowed in the moonlight, marking her as both warrior and healer. Power hummed beneath her skin, the sacred gift that had awakened during the tower battle, now a constant presence. "Riker invokes ancient law," Neve said, her voice carrying to every corner of the grounds. But he forgets that ancient law also gives the contested mate a voice, and I choose to use mine. She turned to face Riker fully, meeting his eyes without flinching. You're right about one thing. I never formally rejected our fated bond. I ran away instead, let circumstances and your cruelty do the work for me. That was cowardice on my part. She took a breath, feeling Malachi's confusion and concern through their bond. So let me rectify that now before all assembled packs under the twin blood moons where no magic can hide truth. Neve raised her hands, and golden light began to glow around her fingers, the healing power that had saved Malachi, that had broken ancient curses. But now she turned that power inward, searching for the thread that had once connected her to Riker. It was there, thin and frayed, nearly invisible compared to the blazing bond she shared with Malachi, a remnant of what the moon goddess had once woven between them. Neve wrapped her power around it, feeling its weakness, its wrongness. I, Neve Ashwood, Queen of Bloodcrown Empire, reject you, Riker of Moonstone. Her voice rang out clear and absolute. I reject our fated bond. I reject any claim you have or ever had upon me. I sever this connection by my will and my choice, witnessed by all packs under the sacred blood moon. The crimson moon above suddenly blazed brighter, its light intensifying until it was nearly blinding. Neve felt the fated bond, that thin, damaged thread, begin to dissolve. But unlike when Riker had rejected her, causing agony, this severance felt like freedom, like chains breaking. The golden light around her hands intensified, and she pulled. The bond snapped with an audible crack that echoed across supernatural planes. Riker screamed. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his chest as if he'd been stabbed. The pain of true bond severance hit him all at once. The agony he'd forced Neve to endure amplified by the power of her gift, by the witnessing moons, by the absolute finality of her rejection. He howled, the sound breaking into a wolf's cry of anguish. His body convulsed, unable to process the severing of a connection the moon goddess herself had forged. Neve stood over him, her power still blazing, her scars gleaming like lightning. You don't get to challenge for me. You don't get to claim me. You threw me away when I was broken, and now I'm whole, not because you weren't there, but because you weren't. Everything strong in me grew from surviving your cruelty. She turned to the assembled crowd, her voice rising with absolute conviction. I choose Malachi, not because of power or position or ancient laws. I choose him because he saw worth where others saw damage, because he offered partnership where others offered pity, because his scars match mine, and together we're stronger than we ever were apart. Neve looked back at Malachi, who stood frozen at the edge of the circle, his golden eyes bright with emotion. I choose him. I always will. The crowd erupted. Thousands of wolves howled their approval, the sound shaking the earth. Pack leaders stood and roared their support. Even wolves from Riker's coalition looked away in shame, realizing they'd followed a male driven by obsession rather than justice. Malachi crossed the circle in 3 long strides and pulled Neve into his arms, kissing her with desperate intensity. Through their bond, she felt his relief, his pride, his overwhelming love. When they broke apart, Riker was still on his knees, gasping for breath. The pain of the severed bond would last for days, possibly weeks. It was a suffering he deserved, a taste of what he'd inflicted on Neve. The high priestess approached, her ancient face grave but approving. The challenge is void. The fated bond is severed by mutual rejection, witnessed and sealed by the twin blood moons. Riker of Moonstone has no claim. The matter is settled. 2 of Riker's own warriors came forward to help him stand. He looked at Neve with eyes that held no madness now, only hollow defeat. You were supposed to be nothing without me. I was always something, Neve replied quietly. You were just too blind to see it. As Riker was led away, broken and humiliated before the entire werewolf world, Neve felt the last chains of her past fall away. She turned to Malachi, to the male who'd proven that true mates weren't always chosen by the goddess. Sometimes they were chosen by courage, by recognition, by 2 broken souls deciding to heal together. Take me home, she whispered. Malachi lifted her into his arms, her white robes flowing around them both. "You are home," he said against her hair. "You always were." The blood moon shone down on them as they left the ceremonial grounds, and the celebration that followed lasted until dawn. The story of the rejected mate who became a queen, who severed her own fated bond and chose love on her own terms, would be told for generations. But that night, Neve and Malachi cared nothing for legends or politics. They had each other, bound by choice rather than fate, and that was enough. Spring arrived at Bloodcrown Palace like a benediction, transforming the harsh mountain landscape into something almost magical. Wildflowers carpeted the valleys in waves of purple and gold. The forests that had stood bare and skeletal through winter now burst with green life. Even the ancient stones of the palace seemed to warm under the generous sun, as if the entire realm was celebrating its liberation from the curse. Neve stood at the window of the royal chambers she now shared with Malachi, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of amber and rose. 6 months had passed since the Blood Moon Challenge, 6 months of learning to rule beside her mate, of using her healing gift to help the injured and sick throughout the empire, of finally understanding what it meant to belong. She had become beloved in ways she never anticipated. The people called her the Healing Queen, the Curse Breaker, the Silver Scarred. They brought their children for her blessing, their warriors for her healing touch, their disputes for her diplomatic wisdom. What had started as tolerance born of Malachi's authority had transformed into genuine affection. But lately, Neve had noticed changes in herself, a persistent exhaustion that even full nights of sleep couldn't cure, a sensitivity to smells that made breakfast in the Great Hall almost unbearable, her breasts tender, her emotions closer to the surface than usual. She had dismissed it for weeks, attributing it to stress or perhaps a mild illness. Until this morning, when the healer examining an injured guard had taken one look at Neve and gone very still. "Your Majesty," the old woman had said carefully, "might I examine you as well? I sense something unusual." Now, standing at the window with the healer's words echoing in her mind, Neve pressed her hand to her still flat stomach and felt tears slip down her cheeks. Wonder and terror warred inside her in equal measure. The chamber door opened, and Malachi entered, still wearing his council clothes, his face showing the weariness of a long day spent mediating territorial disputes. But his expression transformed the moment he saw her tears. "Neve," he crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "No," her voice broke on the word. "I'm not hurt, I'm just... Malachi, I need to tell you something." Fear flickered across his features. Through their mate bond, she felt his immediate assumption that she was ill, that something was threatening to take her from him. His hands trembled slightly against her skin. "The healer examined me today," Neve continued, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach. "She confirmed what I've been suspecting for the past week, though I was too afraid to believe it." Malachi's golden eyes searched hers, confusion and hope and fear all mixing together. "I'm carrying your children, Malachi." Neve's voice strengthened with each word, joy finally overwhelming her terror. "Twins, a son and a daughter. The healer says they're strong, healthy, growing exactly as they should." The world seemed to stop. Malachi stood frozen, his hand pressed against her stomach, his expression one of absolute shock. For a long moment, he didn't breathe, didn't move, just stared at her as if she'd spoken in a language he couldn't comprehend. "Children," he finally whispered. "Twins." "The curse is truly broken," Neve said, her own tears flowing freely now. "When I healed you, when that golden light shattered those black threads wrapped around your life force, it didn't just save you. It restored what the curse had stolen from your bloodline, the ability to create life, to continue." Malachi's knees seemed to give out. He sank down before her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his face pressing against her stomach. His shoulders shook with silent sobs, 2 centuries of grief and loss and desperate hope finally breaking free. "No royal heir has been born in over 200 years, he said against her, his voice raw with emotion. "My great-great-grandfather was the last, Every generation since has tried and failed. My own parents, his voice caught. My mother endured 7 miscarriages. The curse took every child before they could draw breath. It broke her, broke them both. Neve's hands found his hair, stroking gently as he wept. Through their bond, she felt the enormity of what this meant. Not just an heir, but proof that the darkness was truly defeated, that the future held life rather than slow extinction. The healers confirmed it, Neve said softly. They examined me thoroughly, used every diagnostic magic they possess. The twins are protected by my gift. That same golden light that broke the curse wraps around them like a shield. Nothing can harm them. They will be born healthy and strong. Malachi looked up at her, his face wet with tears, his golden eyes blazing with emotion so intense it stole her breath. You've given me everything. My life, my crown's future, my hope. You've taken a bloodline destined for extinction and given it immortality. We did this together, Neve corrected, helping him stand. Your strength, my gift, our bond. The twins are proof that broken things can heal, that curses can be shattered, that love chosen freely is stronger than any fate. He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, his hands cradling her face as if she were made of spun glass. When he pulled back, his smile was brighter than she'd ever seen it. Twins, he said again, wonder saturating the word. A son and daughter. The Empire will need to know, Neve said practically, though her own smile matched his. This changes everything. The succession, the political landscape, the hope of our people. Let me have this moment first, Malachi requested, his hand returning to her stomach. Just us, knowing that we created life, that in a few months we'll hold our children, that everything we survived, your attack, my exile, the curse, the battles, all of it led us here. They stood together as twilight deepened outside. 2 wolves who'd been called broken, discovering that they were instead the beginning of something miraculous. The announcement came 3 days later, during a full council session. Malachi stood before his advisors, Neve at his side, and spoke words that hadn't been spoken in the Blood Crown Empire for 2 centuries. The queen is with child, twins, heirs to the throne. The silence was absolute. Then Commander Thuron, the grizzled veteran who'd served 3 generations of cursed kings, let out a roar of joy that shook the rafters. The council erupted, wolves standing and howling their celebration, some weeping openly at news they'd never thought to hear. Within hours, the word spread throughout the palace, then the city, then across the entire empire. Bonfires were lit on every mountain peak. Towns and villages celebrated with feasts that lasted for days. Pack leaders from across the realm sent gifts and pledges of loyalty. The healing queen was carrying the future. The curse was truly, finally, irrevocably broken. But it was a quiet moment 2 weeks later that Neve would remember most clearly. She and Malachi walked through the palace gardens at sunset, his hand resting protectively on her stomach, where the smallest swell was just beginning to show. I was thinking, Neve said softly, about names. Already, Malachi's smile was warm. They won't be born for months yet. I know, but I want them to have names that mean something, that honor where we came from and where we're going. She paused beside the roses his mother had planted, their blooms heavy and sweet. What was your mother's name? Arya, his voice held old grief and new hope. She would have loved you, loved them. Then our daughter will be Arya, Neve decided, and our son. Malachi was quiet for a moment, his golden eyes distant. My father was named Thuron, but that name carries too much darkness. What about yours? Your father, what was his name? Elias, Neve's throat tightened with emotion. He died when I was young, but he taught me to fight, to think, to survive. He would have been proud of who I became. Then Elias for our son. Malachi pulled her close, his lips finding her temple. Arya and Elias, future of the Blood Crown Empire, children of the Cursebreaker and the Broken King who learned to heal together. Not broken anymore, Neve corrected softly. No, Malachi agreed, his hand spreading across her growing belly. Not broken, whole. The spring wind carried the scent of new flowers and fresh possibilities, and the future, once so dark and hopeless, now blazed with light. Winter returned to Bloodcrown Palace with unexpected gentleness, as if the season itself had softened in honor of what was coming. Snow fell in quiet curtains rather than harsh blizzards, blanketing the mountains in pristine white. The palace had been prepared for weeks, healers stationed in the royal chambers, herbs and medicines stockpiled, every precaution taken for the birth that would change everything. Neve woke before dawn on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year giving way to morning. Pain radiated across her swollen belly, tightening in waves that stole her breath. She reached for Malachi beside her, finding him already awake, his golden eyes alert with concern. "It's time," she whispered. What followed was hours of intensity that blurred together, pain and power, Malachi's hand gripping hers, healers moving with efficient calm, her own gift pulsing beneath her skin as her body worked to bring new life into the world. The golden light that had saved Malachi, that had broken the ancient curse, now wrapped around her children as they made their journey from darkness into light. "The first child comes," the head healer announced, her experienced hands guiding. "Push, Your Majesty, now." Neve bore down with everything she had, drawing on reserves of strength forged through years of survival. The pain peaked, impossibly intense, and then suddenly released as her daughter slid into the world. The baby's cry split the dawn, strong, furious, alive. Neve sobbed with relief as the healer placed the tiny, squirming bundle on her chest. Even covered in birth fluids, even wailing with newborn rage, the baby was perfect. A cap of dark hair, impossibly small fingers already curling into fists, and when her eyes opened. "Golden," Malachi breathed, his voice breaking. "She has my eyes." "Arya," Neve whispered, stroking her daughter's cheek. "Welcome, little warrior." But there was no time for rest. The contractions began again almost immediately, the second child demanding entrance. Neve handed Arya to Malachi, watching through pain-hazed vision as the most powerful alpha alive held his daughter with trembling reverence, tears streaming unchecked down his scarred face. The second birth came faster, as if her son was impatient to meet the world his sister had already claimed. Another push, another surge of golden light, and then he was there, smaller than his sister, but no less fierce in his cries. The healer cleaned him quickly and placed him in Neve's arms. Elias, her son. His hair was lighter than his sister's, closer to Neve's blonde, but his eyes, those same impossible golden eyes, marked him as Malachi's son, heir to the blood-crowned throne. "Two perfect children," the head healer said, her old voice thick with emotion. "Healthy and strong. The first royal births in 200 years. The curse is truly broken." Malachi sat carefully on the edge of the bed, Arya cradled in one arm, and looked at his family with an expression of such profound wonder that Neve felt her heart might burst. "We did this," he said, his voice raw. "Against everything fate curses those who called us broken, we created life. We created hope." The doors to the royal chambers opened, and Captain Lyra entered first, her warrior's face soft with emotion. Behind her came Commander Thuron, then the council members who'd waited through the long night. They dropped to their knees as one, heads bowed in reverence. "The heirs of Blood Crown," Thuron announced, his gruff voice carrying to the corridors beyond where more wolves waited. "Prince Elias and Princess Arya, the curse is broken. The bloodline is secured. Long live the royal family." The cry was taken up by every wolf in the palace, echoing through stone corridors and out into the city below. Church bells began to ring. Bonfires blazed to life on distant mountains, signaling the news to every corner of the empire. The children the curse had prevented for 2 centuries had finally arrived. Over the next hours, as Neve recovered and the twins nursed and slept, the realm celebrated with an intensity that bordered on religious fervor. Pack leaders began arriving before noon, traveling through winter weather to witness the miracle with their own eyes. Gifts poured in from every territory, blessed blankets, protective charms, pledges of loyalty written in blood. By evening, Neve sat propped against pillows in the royal bed, cleaned and dressed in soft robes, her children sleeping in ornate cradles on either side. Malachi sat beside her, one hand holding hers, the other resting protectively near Arya's cradle. Through the windows, they could see the celebrations continuing. Lights blazing across the city, wolves dancing in the streets, joy replacing 2 centuries of quiet despair. "Do you remember the Grand Assembly?" Neve asked softly, her voice still tired but content. "When Riker called me damaged goods, when the entire werewolf world agreed I was worthless." "I remember wanting to tear his throat out," Malachi said, his jaw tightening at the memory. "I stood on that auction block thinking my life was over, that I'd been proven right. I was too broken to matter, too scarred to deserve love or purpose or belonging." Neve looked at her sleeping children, these impossible miracles. "And now look at us. The broken she-wolf they scorned is queen mother of the new dynasty. The children everyone said could never exist are sleeping peacefully beside us. We didn't just survive, Malachi. We triumphed." "You triumphed," he corrected gently. "Every step of the way. You could have stayed broken when Riker rejected you. You could have accepted Moonstone's judgment, believed what they said about your worth. Instead, you took my hand and chose to see if there was more. You chose to be brave." "We chose each other," Neve said. "That's what made the difference." A knock sounded, and Alina peeked in. "Forgive the intrusion, your majesties, but there are thousands gathered outside the palace. They're asking. They want to see the royal family, just a glimpse to confirm the miracle is real." Malachi looked at Neve, letting her decide. She was exhausted, her body still recovering, but she understood what this meant to their people. Hope required proof. "Help me to the balcony," Neve said. "Let them see." With Malachi supporting her, Neve made her way to the great balcony that overlooked the city. He carried both twins carefully, one in each arm. When they emerged into the winter twilight, a roar rose from the gathered crowd that shook the very stones of the palace. Thousands of wolves stood below, filling every street and square visible from this height. When they saw the twins, small bundles wrapped in royal blue, alive and perfect, the roar transformed into howls of pure joy. Grown warriors wept openly. Mothers lifted their own children to see. The sound echoed across mountains and valleys, a declaration that darkness had been defeated. Malachi raised the twins higher, presenting them to the realm. Prince Elias and Princess Arya, heirs of Blood Crown, children of the Curse Breaker, future of the Empire. The crowd's response was deafening. Neve stood beside her mate, looking out at the sea of faces, and saw in them what she'd been searching for her entire life. Acceptance. Belonging. Love not despite her scars, but in recognition of everything those scars represented. Survival, strength, the refusal to be broken by cruelty. "Your Majesty," a voice called from the crowd, "bless us. Bless the Empire with your gift." Neve raised her hand, and golden light bloomed around her fingers. The sacred healing power that had saved Malachi, broken the curse, protected her children. She sent it out across the gathered wolves, a wave of warmth and hope and promise. Not healing any specific wound, but offering the possibility of healing. The reminder that broken things could be made whole. The crowd erupted again, and this time the chant was clear. "Long live the healing queen. Long live the royal heirs. Long live Blood Crown." Later, when the twins had been fed and burped and finally settled into peaceful sleep, when the celebrations had quieted to a gentle hum beyond the palace walls, Neve and Malachi lay together in their bed. His arm wrapped around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest, both of them too full of wonder to sleep despite their exhaustion. "I never thought I'd have this," Malachi admitted quietly. "A mate I loved, children to carry my legacy, a future beyond survival. The curse stole that hope from every generation of my family, and you gave it back." "You gave me back to myself," Neve countered. "When I had nothing, no pack, no worth, no reason to believe in tomorrow, you saw something valuable. You offered choice when everyone else offered pity or cruelty. You proved that my scars didn't define my worth." "They never did." His lips found her temple. "Your worth was always there, Neve. You just needed someone to help you see it." Through the windows, the first stars emerged, competing with the celebration fires still burning across the Empire. In their cradles, Arya and Elias slept peacefully, unaware that their very existence had rewritten history. That they were living proof that love chosen freely was stronger than any curse, that survival itself was a form of magic, that two broken souls could heal together and create something miraculous. Neve closed her eyes, feeling Malachi's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, and understood that this was victory. Not just survival, but thriving. Not just existence, but purpose. Not just acceptance, but belonging so complete it had rewritten her very definition of home. She had been called too broken for love, too damaged for worth, too scarred to deserve a future. But here, in the arms of her mate, surrounded by children who should have been impossible, ruling an empire that celebrated rather than scorned her, Neve had proven a truth more powerful than any curse. Scars don't define worth. Survival does. And she had survived everything, emerging not diminished, but magnificent. The broken she-wolf had become a queen, and her story would be told for generations. A reminder that love, hope, and new beginnings have no expiration date, and that those who survive the darkness often shine the brightest in the light. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever been told you're too broken, too damaged, too scarred to deserve love and happiness, let Neve's journey be your reminder. Being broken is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your greatest strength. Your scars don't make you less worthy of love. They prove you're a survivor. And survival, that's the most powerful thing you can be. Don't let this message fade into the noise. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe so you never miss stories that remind you of your own worth. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your story isn't over. Like Neve, your best chapters might still be unwritten. See you in the next story.